Good morning again, grade 9s. Today, we're going to take a look at what is known as short story elements. So, I'm going to minimize this here. We're going to get right into things. Slideshow. Okay, so short stories are a good starting point, a good basis for a grade 9 course. So, all of the things that go into making of a story. So there's 5 types of conflict we're going to look at. Person versus person, person versus society, person versus nature, person versus themselves, and person versus technology. So person versus person is pretty easy to remember. It's just problem with another character. I got a picture of GSP here. It looks like he's landing an elbow on someone. So when we're reading a short story and there is conflict between 2 characters within that story, then that is considered a person versus person conflict. Person versus society. So person versus society is when a character in the story has a problem with the laws or the beliefs of a group. Maybe they get into trouble with a police officer or something. That would be an example of this person versus society. Person versus nature. There's a couple good stories on this. One of my personal favorites by Jack London. It's called To Build a Fire. And it's set in like the Yukon gold rush age, and he's mushing with his dog, trying to make it to camp before dark. And he falls through a creek, gets all wet, tries to light a fire to stay warm, but he lights it under a big pine tree, and the tree has, all of the branches have snow on them. And as he gets his fire going on the bottom and the heat's going up, he releases all that snow onto his fire, snuffs out the fire. And that is an example of person versus nature. There's also another one, I don't know if we're going to take a look at it maybe if we have time, but it's called The Time of Wolves by Marcia Mueller. And it's about living in the old homesteads, the pioneers of Canada, and how she was like, had a bunch of wolves outside of her house. And so those are examples of person versus nature. So it usually involves a problem with a natural force like a flood or storm or even wild animals. So person versus themselves. So this is when a character has problems deciding what to do or think. The character could become mad, like Hamlet in the Shakespeare play. So, there's definitely, I believe, in one of the stories that we're reading, a person versus themselves type of conflict. Person versus technology. So, this is a common theme, like if you like science fiction type stories, it is a struggle with technological forces. So, I don't know if you have seen this movie before, but it came out in the mid-2000s. It's called iRobot. I don't know what this is from, and it's got a random picture, but that's Will Smith. All of these robots turn evil in the movie. So, yeah, person versus technology is a theme that's typically found in like science fiction. All right. I'm sure you've seen this in your language classes, grade 7 or 8. This is called a plot line or storyline. So it's made up of a few different parts. We've got the exposition, is a fancy word of saying beginning. Initial incident is something that happens that kind of kicks the action into place. And we then get to the rising action. So as things get more heated up, as characters' conflicts become more complex, we get to the turning point. What is going to happen? Then we get to the climax, which is the highest point of interest in the story. The falling action, and then the denouement, or ending. You'll notice if you look at it from here over, it's quite long, right? That is because after the climax in a story, typically it's only like maybe a paragraph or two. In a short story, in a novel, it might be like the last chapter is going to be like the ending. Everything is building up to that climax all the time. So let's look in more detail what these mean. So in the exposition, in the beginning, the background information that is needed to understand the story properly is provided. So some of this information is the protagonist, the antagonist, the basic conflict, and the setting. The initial incident is the incident which begins the central conflict in the story. So here we got a picture from Simpsons. They're all carrying flaming torches. Obviously something happened they're upset about, so I don't know. I just thought it was a fitting picture. Rising action. So during the rising action, the basic conflict is complicated by the introduction of related secondary conflicts, including various obstacles that frustrate the protagonist's attempt to reach his or her goal. The rest of that isn't really true. Rising action, or not that it's not true, the rest of this doesn't really matter. The rising action makes up the bulk of the story. This is where going to be, all of the content of the story is going to be happening in the rising action. So turning points, whenever I hear the word turning point, I think of, the TSN highlights, the TSN turning point of the night. So turning point is an indication that the climax is about to occur, a decisive moment at which a crucial decision must be made. The climax, or the turning point, marks a change for the better or for the worst in the protagonist's affairs. If the story is a comedy, things will have gone badly for the protagonist up to this point. Now, the tide, so to speak, will turn, and things will begin to go well for him or her. If the story is a tragedy, the opposite state of affairs will ensue, with things going from good to bad for the protagonist. Falling action. We're going to be seeing some of this pretty soon. Hopefully not too soon. Hopefully the snow can hold off till November. During the falling action, the conflict between the protagonist and the antagonist unravels, with the protagonist winning or losing against the antagonist. The falling action might contain a moment of final suspense during which the final outcome of the conflict is in doubt. Resolution is sometimes the denouement, a French term meaning unraveling or unknotting, used to describe the resolution of the plot following the climax. So, characterization. Part of the short stories is looking at things like, we're going to look at setting, characterization, the conflict, plot development. These are all crucial things that in a short story can be applied later on to like a novel or a play. It's all universal in literature. So characterization is the author's description and explanation of the people in the story. So in characterization, we get the character's thoughts, their appearance, their actions, what they say, what others think about them, and comparisons with other characters. So these are some different types of characters. I'm not going to go through and read all of this. Main characters are characters who are central to the conflict. From the previous slides, you've heard the term protagonist and antagonist. The protagonist is the chief character of a story on whom our interest centers. The protagonist is like the main character. And the antagonist is the character or force pitted against the protagonist. Can be one or many. So points of view. Now, talking about points of view, point of view is the way in which the story is told. From what perspective? From what point of view? So the omniscient narrator is the all-knowing. The author tells the story in third person. And what third person means is that he's using pronouns like he or she, or them or they. So we're getting, the author is able to reveal the thoughts and feelings of more than one character. So this has an advantage, is that we kind of know everything that's happening with all the characters, with the plot. The disadvantage, it may destroy the sense of reality. So this is a common point of view, first person, and I have a picture from Halo, one of the earlier Halo games from Xbox 360 here. And why I have this picture is because first-person shooter games, first-person point of view in a story, it's the same thing. You are getting the story through the eyes of the main character, through the eyes of the protagonist. So you're literally stepping inside of this character like you would be in a first-person shooter video game. So the character tells the story. The main character is revealing his or her thoughts and feelings in the story. The advantage is we have an intimacy. Perhaps you identify with that character. The disadvantage is there's no author to interpret directly, so we don't know exactly what the other characters in the story are thinking or what they think about the main character unless they're directly saying it. But limited, sometimes called limited omniscience, so the author tells the story in third person, but only revealing the thoughts and feelings of one character. So advantage is it's more realistic. You usually consider a single point of view. Disadvantage, it's less flexible, less room for interpretation. And objective, author tells the story, third person. Author does not reveal thought, feelings of any character. So the advantage is the speed of the action. The story moves quickly, good for surprise ending. Disadvantage, no interpretation possible by author. And that is the end of the slideshow. So this slideshow correlates with here. This is your short story PowerPoint worksheet, just for you to keep notes while you can go through. These will be uploaded to you. Just some notes that you can keep so that when we take a look at some of the elements of short story, like conflict is going to be important because I'm going to be asking you to identify the conflict in the short stories. What point of view? You will have to fill out a plot graph for one of the short stories we're going to read and talk about the point of view. So if you have any questions, ask them on Edsby or Teams, and we're going to try and live stream this. This video is just for those of you that don't want to be in the live stream with Office 360 or with Microsoft Teams. So if you are watching this video that way, then shoot me a message on Edsby or Teams, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Enjoy the short story elements.